All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to this workshop today. I'm delighted to be with you. I need to take a census of the room. I know we got 2 participants here in person, and we got more online. And so, bienvenidos. If I can get an idea of who's on Zoom, is there a way for me to see Zoom somehow, or like how many people are on Zoom? And just want to welcome everybody. Yep. We got 8 participants. Okay. Hello. All right. All right. Can see some folks here, some questions. All right. All right, well, welcome. Bienvenido. Mi nombre es José Huitrón. Soy un consultor con el Centro de Innovación y Emprendimiento y soy parte del Centro de Desarrollo de Pequeños Negocios, el SBDC de Cal Poly. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. And me gusta tomar este tiempo para ofrecerles una oportunidad para introducirles. Si puedes dar su introducción y compartir con nosotros su nombre y su idea o su compañía o su startup. Si tiene un startup o tiene una idea o compañía, por favor, si puede compartirlo. Me gustaría tomar conocerles más y así empezamos con introducciones. So I would like us to start with introductions, and I want to get a census of the room. I know we promised a bilingual workshop, so I'm trying to see where I need to be in my vein of a bilingual workshop. So yeah. Please share, por favor. Anybody on Zoom? Do we have any audio? Hello, I'm starting a catering company. Okay, bienvenido. Welcome, Irving. English, okay, thank you, Tony. If you need Spanish, put it in the chat. If you need Spanish, otherwise I can know where my zone is, where I need to flow. Entendiendo los dos. Perfect. Okay, well, bienvenido, Irving. Si puedes compartir con nosotros, tienes un catering company. Good morning, Caroline here, joining from SLO. Awesome. Thank you for joining and plugging into this workshop. All right, a bilingual workshop. So I would like to take this opportunity to get a census of the room and just get an idea of who you are and what you're working on. So you could drop it in the chat. Small business and estate planning attorney. Awesome. Interested in helping small businesses get started. Thank you, Jesse, for joining us. Let's feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. We're coming live from the beautiful sandbox in Paso Robles. So estamos en el sandbox de Paso Robles, un espacio muy creativo, y puedes hacer workshops, talleres, y tienen un café. Es un lugar muy hermoso. So si tiene chance de venir y visitar el Paso Robles, vienen al sandbox. Come to the sandbox. It's a great spot if you haven't had that opportunity. But interested in career consulting. All right, Russ. Good to see you, my friend. Recent grads. All right. Anybody else want to share what they do? I know we got some folks live in person. So
yeah, we're looking to open up a bar and lounge in Los Osos.
Okay, bar lounge in Los Osos. Awesome.
Yeah. So Sharice and Karen, we're here, and hello to everyone out there. Love connecting.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you. Any more introduction? Chris, travel service company catering to the needs of families impacted by autism. All right, wonderful. One of the things I do is I teach Intro to Entrepreneurship, which is a business 310 course at Cal Poly, and I have a few teams that are constantly looking at travel and hospitality and how to create better experiences, whether it's food experiences, travel experiences, and so it's a great space to be. So I've done a lot of research and brainstorming in those areas. So all right, so we'll energy storage. All right, Tony, welcome. All right, well, thank you for joining us. We can go to the next slide. Please, thank you. All right, so we've already shared a few thoughts here on some of the ideas that folks want to share or folks are exploring at starting. And so we can go to the next slide, or if I can control it somehow. I have my clicker. Try this. Is it on that machine? Let's start there. Go to the next slide. Thank you, Madison. Thank you. All right, well, welcome to this workshop, and let's just dig right in. So what we're talking about and exploring first is viability. And so with viability, when we start with the origin of an idea, this workshop is about cómo emprender su negocio, how to start your startup, how to launch your startup. So I believe it's important to start with these 5 questions and respond to these 5 questions. The first one, it helps us go, these 5 questions help us go from concept to idea to a roadmap or a path to getting our ideas off the ground. And what I love about this, what we try to do with SBDC is we try to bring in that body of knowledge and resources that, we're sharing and studying from startups to scale-ups to small business to really bring those practices to the forefront. So the 5 questions, the first one is, what are you selling? What? What are you selling? Does it relate to a need? Does it relate to a need? Is there a need? And so la primera pregunta es ¿qué vendes? Y es la primera pregunta que te puede ayudar a pasar desde la idea hasta el concepto, un concepto, una oportunidad para lograr éxito. So, la primera pregunta es ¿qué vendes? What do you sell? What? And so that's why I kind of enjoy asking folks to kind of introduce themselves a little bit and understand explore that question of what you're trying to build or what it is that you're launching or what are you selling? What are you selling? So the key question there is what. The next thing, number 2, is who. And so I know it's very basic, very fundamental, but this really is the guiding post and gives us a sense of direction for everything that we do. So when you study startups and why companies fail, and you look at the reports, the number 1 reason why companies fail is there's no market need. Una de las razones más grandes en por qué los negocios fallan y no crecen es porque no hay demanda, no hay una marqueta, no hay mercado, y no hay clientes. So it's important to understand who your client is. Who's your client and who's going to buy? And so if you can define that initially in the early stage, the first step to launching a business, a new idea, a small business is, if we step back, it's important to document your journey. Because we have so many ideas in our head and we're trying to synthesize and make sense of ideas and all of the variables and inputs and possibilities and perhaps feedback coming our way. And we have all these signals. So just the art of documenting our journey allows us to bring some structure to what is a lot of the time intangible. And so by documenting these questions, the first one is, what are you going to sell? Can you clearly define what you're going to sell and who your client is one of the first steps. Number 3 is why. What's the motivation of your buyer? It's buyer motivation. So the third question is, why are they going to buy? So the first question was, what are you selling? The second question is, who is your client? Who are your customers? Who's going to buy? The third one is, why are they going to buy? What's their motivation? And number 4 is, where are you going to sell? Where are you going to sell? Location and distribution, and talking about geography and reach. Where are you going to sell? Where are you going to start? And what I love about entrepreneurship is we don't have to start with the big win. We can start small, right? We can start small, and we can start small to go big. So that initial location, that initial niche, I think of the sandbox. Thank you, Tony, for joining us from Kern County. I think of the sandbox in this creative space. And I remember going back 10, 12 years, my buddy Kyle Ashby, and the way he started getting into entrepreneurship and community is through starting small by starting a networking group to bring people and ideas and resources together in Santa Barbara, started his initial space called the Sandbox, and now has grown into these multiple location venues in the Sandbox. And so he started small and has grown, and it's great to see. So su inicio puede empezar con algo pequeño, right? So your beginning can start with something small. So embrace that, really embrace that. It's one step. You start small to go big. And so where are you going to sell? Location, distribution, number 5, and feel free to stop me with any questions. Por favor, esté libre para hacerme preguntas. Number 4 is, where are you going to sell? Number 5 is, how are you better than the competition? How are you better? What are your competitive advantages? ¿Cuáles son sus ventajas competitivas? ¿Cómo vas a ser mejor de los 10, 15, 20 otros de la competencia? Porque we have to admit, tenemos que admitir que hay mucha competencia. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. There's a ton of competition. And one of my favorite sayings is that right there, that, you know, ideas, everybody comes up with ideas, and there's a ton of competition, but don't let the competition discourage you. But the key question here is, in what ways can you be better? In what ways can you be better? And with innovation and entrepreneurship, some of the important questions is like, well, I have to create a new product or a new service. Para ser creativo o ser un emprendedor, tengo que lanzar algo nuevo o algo, pero eso no es la verdad. Puedes mejorar lo que existe. So you can improve what's already in business. So differentiation, what some folks call differentiation, or your competitive advantages, in what ways are you going to escape the competitive herd? And it could start with a process change from what folks are doing. It doesn't have to be a product, a service, or an experience, but it can actually be a system or a method of bettering the status quo. So when we talk, I know the workshop had promised myths and realities about entrepreneurship. And so I'm going to get into some of those realities, a few myths, and just a few favorite quotes of mine. You know, and so what folks say is, if you want to go far, or if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Uno de mis dichos favoritos dice que si quieres ir rápido, ve solo. And so it's important to recognize that it takes a village. It takes a village of resources. So are you working together on this idea? Beautiful. Like, you have somebody else to align and bounce ideas off of. That's fantastic. And I don't know about the rest of you, how many of you are solo founders, solo entrepreneurs doing this alone, or how many have a team? One of the biggest pieces of advice I can get you to share with you to get your ideas off the ground is look for a village, build a tribe, and hire people who have greater skills and abilities who can help complement what you bring to the table. You have a team, Irving, awesome. Thank you for sharing. And so it takes a team, it takes a village. And so when you look at the myths and realities, los mitos y realidades sobre el emprendimiento, it's important to recognize that los empresarios exitosos, there's certain characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. Y primero, los empresarios exitosos, the successful entrepreneurs, they're visionaries, son visionarios. They can see what other people can't see. They take initiative, tienen iniciativa, son organizados, they're very organized, son sociables, pueden conectar con personas, pueden crecer y conectar y hacer su network, crecer su network, su red de conexiones. Son sociables, they're sociable, they're friendly, they're willing to share their ideas. And they take risks, toman riesgos. And those are the truths and realities of entrepreneurship. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to go together. And there are certain characteristics and qualities of successful entrepreneurs. And when you talk about taking risks, There's another one not on the list, but we can add embracing failure. You got to be able to embrace failure and use those learning lessons as building blocks to build your business one step, one brick at a time. And one thing, another key point is that the entrepreneurial spirit is a competitive advantage. El espíritu empresarial va más allá de la competencia y el riesgo que supone crear una empresa. Es un espíritu arriesgado que requiere confianza en sí mismo y autonomía. You have to be confident in yourself. And so when you look at like, how do you get an idea off the ground? The key question there that you're wanting to explore in the initial stages, when you're looking at this topic of viability, how do you scope viability? How do you check an idea? Well, it's these questions around who you are, what you do, who's going to buy, where, and how you're going to be different, your why. And these are the basics because it's helping you scope and check three really critical buckets. Like if you're connecting and networking and talking to people and building resources, and you're unfolding answers and insights in these three areas, the first one being desirability. Is there a market? Is there a demand? The second one being viability. And of course, the next one being feasibility. So the three questions are, who wants this? Can I do this? And should I do this? So when you look at viability and how to get it, before you launch, there's some, you have to have a defined market. And so when we look at viability, we're going to start with, antes de empezar a emprender, necesitas tener una marca definida. You have to have a well-defined market. I don't know about you or how many people have heard of the 4 Ps or the 5 Ps, the 5 Ps of marketing. The first one is product. It's the first P of marketing. It's an essential fundamental. It's like, what's your product? Number 2 is promise. What's your, primero es el producto. The second one, la segunda es la promesa. What is your promise, your key value proposition, your promise that you're offering your customers? And this is everything. Like if you write this down and you answer these questions, it helps you feed into marketing campaigns and you know, just building ways to share your story and build a market awareness. So it's like, what is my product? Why is it different? What's the promise? The next one is el tercer es la presentación. Presentation. La presentación es muy importante. Posiblemente es lo más importante, la presentación. Presentation is perhaps the most important attribute that you can have because everything that we do is defined by how we present our business. So that's where I see most opportunity for existing businesses right now is how you differentiate through your branding and marketing and presentation. There are 20 million coffee shops. I don't know however many, like, I don't know, that's probably exaggerating, but we can go outside and we can see there's this insurance firm, there's this travel company, like there's a ton of competition out there. And not everybody takes the time to go through the little details of presentation. So if you can find ways to polish your presentation from your brand to your events, to your marketing campaigns, to your customer relations, to how you work with your employees, that's a differentiator, okay? And of course, the next P, the first one was product, second is promise, third is presentation, the fourth is price. The fifth one is promotion, la promoción. The fourth one is price. What are you charging? And the fifth one is where are you going to distribute? How are you going to distribute? La promoción. Esos son todos los esfuerzos para comunicarte con tu cliente. Y hoy en día el marketing digital es muy usado por emprendedores para promocionar su producto a través de las redes sociales. So, una ventaja o una oportunidad es saber cómo usar las redes sociales y usar el marketing digital. Knowing how to use digital marketing is one of the best advantages that you can have. That's where you can differentiate because so many people, even in this day, it's surprising that even in this day, people are still trying to figure out social media. And it's almost a de facto standard of business. And so some key tips there on viability and starting your business. Some key considerations for planning your business. The first one is your legal structure. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Common structures. business names, establishing your business name, or what some folks call your fictitious business name. Then there's, of course, local and state licenses. There's also employer requirements. You have to have the right insurance, the right requirements, federal and state. You have to understand and pay taxes, of course. There's tax considerations. One of the key points here is documentation, right? Having systems in place. And the reason I love that we have building business systems, constructing business systems is one of the keys, is because, again, that's fundamental. Like documenting your journey, systems will save you when you put in 10% of time into building business systems around what you're doing. It's going to save you hours later and percentages of time tenfold later. Like what you establish now with systems is going to A, reduce stress, and B, help you have a system in place to handle growth, to handle scale. And so the first one was the legal structure, second one, business name. We have commercials. And then, of course, understanding how and where to pay taxes. And then, of course, funding your venture. That's another important consideration. So how to finance your venture, which we'll talk about. We're going to break down, we're going to dig into each of these here a little bit. So let's talk about building your legal structure, selecting your legal structure. Selecting your legal structure. So one of the first structures is sole proprietorship. How many folks are going to operate as a sole proprietorship or have given thought to that process? By show of hands via the chat. Okay, thank you, Irving. Ok, hay diferentes opciones para establecer y elegir una estructura comercial. Primero, el propietario único, what they call sole proprietorship. Segunda es el LLC, conocido como el LLC, compañía de responsabilidad limitada. And the third one is a partnership, sociedad. And of course, corporaciones. Y hay diferentes tipos de corporaciones. Primero, el C, el C Corp, llamado como el C Corp. La segunda es el S Corp, and the third is a B Corp. So, starting as a sole proprietorship and converting to a corporation in January. Okay, strategically moving into those positions, good. And then maybe switch to an LLC. Okay, so as a sole proprietorship, switching to an LLC. Okay, so I'm getting an idea. Are you in partnership? What are you thinking? LLC, okay. And what's some of the reasons we're thinking LLC? Because it's a legal entity structure.
Yeah. I think it's more for the safety of our business.
It's a way to protect,
Right.
protect your personal assets.
Our
Right.
personal, exactly.
And it establishes a structure and a central point for business transaction, right? So it allows you to tap into the key point before about presentation, because when you have an established firm, a lot of people can build tremendous credibility on their name, right? And operating as a sole proprietorship. But when it comes to your personal assets and tax considerations, initially, if you're wanting to conduct transactions and work together with partners and have those protections in place, an LLC is a good initial step. Now, if you see yourself as a traditional scale up, wanting to scale big into potentially what they call venture capital and raising funds at a significant level, then there are preferred legal structures, especially for things like apps, marketplaces, software. Most popular, common place for venture capitalists and investors in your initial rounds of funding is to form as a C Corp. So I spent a lot of time working with early stage startups, and I can tell you that a lot of them switch from LLC to C Corp. And then some stay LLC, and they can go far from there. And it offers the tax protections, the legal protections, so people can't come after your personal assets. So LLC, absolutely. Thank you. It's an LLC, a way of protecting owners. So yes, so es una manera de proteger sus bienes, establecer como un LLC o el estructura comercial llamado el LLC o una compañía de responsabilidad limitada nos da la oportunidad de tener protecciones, proteger los propietarios. So partnerships is another form, another legal structure, partnerships, and of course, C Corps, S Corps, and B Corps. So the first thing you need to do is you need to establish your legal structure. Next thing, one key step that we got to talk about when you're first launching your business and establishing a legal structure is your name, the name of your business. So usually there's a little gray area and some unknowns with folks who are wanting to start their business is how do I register the name of my business? So like there are key considerations. There are business requirements, license requirements, and depending on the structure of your business and whether or not you use your name or you use what they call a fictitious name, for instance, using something like Delicia's Delights or Sunrise Construction or Sea Breeze Realty, those are fictitious business names not connected to the name of the business owner. So we do have to establish what they call a fictitious business name or what's more known as a DBA. So who needs to establish? The common question is who needs to register a DBA or a fictitious business name? Who is required to establish or register a fictitious business name? Do you have one already? Yeah. What's that?
Hi.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. And it's not your names.
No.
Okay.
No.
So
No.
have you established a fictitious business name yet? Or okay. All right. So what you do is you go through, you have to fill out the form, you file for a DBA, what's called a DBA. And there's a process with that. The process is you have to publish, and it has to be in the newspaper for a certain amount of time. And it's a relatively low barrier to entry, but it's an absolute requirement, right? If you're not using your name. And so, asegurando su nombre comercial. So la primera pregunta es, ¿cuándo necesitas registrar un nombre como DBA? Conocido como doing business as, un DBA. So los que tienen que registrar son los propietarios únicos o sociedades. Si usted es propietario único o cofundador de una sociedad, desea hacer negocios con un nombre diferente de su nombre personal, por ejemplo, Rogers Plumbing, necesita registrar un DBA, conocido como un fictitious business name. Cualquier nombre comercial que sugiera más de un propietario, como por ejemplo Trujillo and Sons Trucking, necesitan registrar what they call a fictitious business name, un nombre ficticio, un nombre comercial ficticio. So, okay, so estos son los requisitos para registrar un DBA. These are the requirements for registering a DBA. The first one is you have to present with the county clerk's office. Tiene que presentar en la oficina del secretario del condado. Hay un costo de $52 in Slow County. That's the cost for a DBA, for a fictitious business name, is about $52. And you have to publish. So fictitious business name, su nombre comercial ficticio, debe ser publicado en un periódico local, en los medios, durante 4 semanas consecutivas. And the cost for publishing, el costo para publicar, es más o menos $60 a $80. So, en total, es siendo casi 140. So, la declaración jurada de publicación debe presentarse ante la oficina del secretario del condado. So once you publish, you have to show that you've published to the county clerk. Se renueva, and you have to renew it every 5 years.
So you go to the newspaper.
Yeah.
And you go pay at the local paper.
Yes, you go to the county clerk's office and you ask, hey, I want to register a new business name. And then they'll give you a form, and usually they have options listed on the form where you can publish. New Times, Slow Tribune, those things. So yeah, so everybody knows out there. It's like you're telling me I have to share my idea and put it out there? Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what that's going to lead to, unfortunately, is you have to do it. It's going to lead to spam, like mail, spam mail. Because you do get mail, from businesses out there who are purchasing these databases who want to promote commercial services.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's an essential, and it's a pretty easy process to do. And so if you want to know what new businesses are getting launched, what you could do is you could just read the boring reading, but go through there and say, oh, I see a new marketing business being developed, or I see a new construction business in the works. You can get an idea for who's launching what in the local neighborhood. So it's kind of cool. Okay, so preguntas. Are there any other questions about registering a DBA? This is kind of one of the first steps.
Can I go back to LLC? Can you
Yes.
do an LLC without registering for DBA?
My understanding with an LLC is if you're using, because the LLC is a company that you're establishing, it already has, through formal documentation and articles of incorporation, things like that, a fictitious name, like a name of a business. But if you plan to use a name other than that, you would need to do a DBA. So we may be like, for instance, we may be like Castle Construction, but we're going to do business as Seaside Builders. But our main enterprise is Castle Construction. So you would need to do a DBA. That's a good question. Yes. Yes. Other folks can use DBAs depending on how they want to present and do business. Thank you, Jesse. Absolutely. Other questions about registering DBAs? And I typically know when folks start, they have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions. I know in working with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs and small business owners, the common question is, what is the right entity for me? Some people jump to an S Corp, some people jump to an LLC when they're really building an app and should probably go C Corp. Some people quickly need to move from a sole proprietorship to an LLC to protect their individual assets. Yeah. So any questions? Okay, looking good. So I'll continue here. I got to 11, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank
You should be able to use your clicker.
you. Okay, perfect. All right, so when it comes to commercial licenses, local and state, and of course there's federal and local licenses that are required for conducting business. Commercial licenses in the city of San Luis Obispo, there's it depends on your income and revenue. There are certain requirements for certain types of businesses. If you're going to work out of your home, there's what's called occupational. There's a charge for being an occupational home occupation. If you're doing business, some cities and counties require a license outside of the area. The best thing to do is to work with your city clerk and your city office and your county offices for licenses and requirements. To understand, depending on the type of business and the structure of your business, understanding what those requirements are at the city level. Then at the county level, there are certain requirements in the county as well, depending, especially for businesses that are located in the incorporated areas of a county. And if you're operating across state lines in various cities and counties, depending on what your business structure and type is, the type of business, you may need to pursue different requirements. And so one of the questions the main question is, where are you conducting business? Where are you conducting business? So hay licencias comerciales, locales y estatales. depende en dónde va a hacer negocio, y es basado en los ingresos. Hay diferentes licencias comerciales que son necesarias. Algunas ciudades requieren una licencia fuera del área, si vas a transactar o hacer negocio fuera de un área, y puedes consultar el departamento de finanzas o trabajar con la oficina, con el clerk's office de San Luis Obispo. Y hay licencias del condado, no solo de la ciudad de San Luis Obispo, hay licencias requeridos también del condado. Y la pregunta principal es preguntarse dónde está haciendo negocios sin atender a los clientes. So the question to really ask is, where are you conducting business without transacting with clients? So really, those are key questions there. It's like, where am I doing business? And then there's also commonly a lot of questions about doing business online. So that's another area to look at and recognize and understand. You may be based in a certain state, but if you're doing business online and conducting business in another state, there may be requirements depending on what you're doing and what products are being offered, whether they're digital or they're products that are being shipped. So questions. So main point here is there's state licenses, county requirements. There may be multiple depending on where you're transacting business. And the key question is like, the first question to ask yourself, if a business license requirement is there, is to ask where you're conducting business. And in some cases, if you establish a firm in California and you want to do business in Colorado, you're going to be what's called a foreign operator, right? And you'll need to get a license in that state. And so what a lot of people do is they'll get a Delaware C corp to establish their corp. But if they're doing business in California, they'll need to get a foreign entity and pay for that in California if they're doing business as what California would consider a foreign entity, because they're out of the state. So like you can be in California, get ready for that VC capital or investment, get a Delaware C corp, and then think you're done. You're not done, because if you're doing business in California, you need to get a foreign, what they call a foreign corporation license approval through the state of California. So it really depends on where you're doing business. So
like, say you're using a kitchen at home and so you would have to license your kitchen, because that's a place of
yes, and
conduct. And then also, if it's also a brick and mortar, they're connected, they each need their.
yes, and also for tax purposes, because you're using part of your home, you can do it as a tax write-off. And so because some people can get like the cottage, do cottage and food products at home, or the home occupation license, like you're doing that, you want to get that. And then of course, whatever requirements for having that brick and mortar, for sure, yeah. All right, the next thing, one of the key fundamentals for establishing your business and making it official is to secure what's called an employer identification number. Uno de los primeros pasos es establecer o registrar un número de identificación de empleador, o más conocido como an EIN number. An EIN number is required for sole proprietors with employees, and it's also for S Corp, C Corp, LLC, and B Corps, partnerships, trusts, nonprofits, co-ops need to establish an EIN, what they call an EIN number. Now, the beautiful thing is if you're a sole proprietor, rather than use your social security number, get an EIN so you can share that with different business contacts, especially if you're a consultant and you're filling out a bunch of W-9s and you have quite a few clients and you're sharing out and conducting business as a sole proprietor. Get an EIN because you can protect your social security number. So es mejor usar un número de identificación del empleador, un EIN, porque no necesitas usar su número de seguro. Puedes usar un número EIN en vez de su número de seguro para proteger su información personal. So that's another perk, even if you're a sole proprietorship, is to get an EIN number, because if you're filling W-9s out, you can put that on the form that you're sending for those tax purposes, and it's just a good number to have. It's an easy process. It's free, and you can go to irs.gov. Puedes visitar a irs.gov para obtener más información y no se requiere para propietario único sin empleados, pero es mejor conseguirlo y usarlo en vez de usar su número de seguro. So with the IRS, it's an easy process. It's free, and you fill out a form and you get your EIN number and you can start to use that. And most tax professionals will be able to help you establish that if you need support, but it's a free process at irs.gov. So get an EIN, get your licenses, register your business, select the right business entity, and start with a good sense of direction in these key legal requirements to get off on the right foot. So, all right, federal tax ID. Federal tax ID is required, especially after you establish and register your business. And be careful with websites that try to charge you for these services, for getting a tax ID or an EIN number. Be careful with that. And always try to go through the .govs and make sure it's the official website, of course.
There should be no charge.
There should be no charge for an EIN.
And going back on all these items you've discussed, is there a awareness that we need to have about a wait time?
An EIN number is a pretty quick process.
Okay.
And you got to be careful too, depending on what services you use. This is why you really would want to take advantage of the services of the SBDC and work with consultants who can guide you through registration processes, entity formation, tax considerations. Because what I've seen is there's a lot of sites that are like LegalZoom, Atlas Stripe, Atlas, Clerky. You know, we've seen startups and companies form where the investors and the lawyers come in as part of their due diligence and have to clean up a mess, especially if they're using like the quick services like LegalZoom. It could be $300 to get you, oh yeah, official corporation, LLC established, but then you're stuck in the water when you have to clean things up or switch from LLC to C Corp or vice versa. And so I would say the process can be very quick on establishing your entity. And there's a timing aspect to it, because once you establish your LLC or your corporation, you're committing yourself to the renewal fees in the state with the state, and usually $800. And so it's usually, you want to time it well to where you actually need it. You're ready to conduct business. You have letters of intent or potential partnerships. It's like you have some initial traction that you want to build upon, get registered, get it organized, and just operate on a clean slate.
Yeah. Saying that, do you think it's wise to do, so we're November 16th, if they want to do something right now, is it better for us to wait to January 1st?
It's a good question. Yeah, because of the $800.
Reserve grace period.
I would think, I say I'm not fully up to speed, but I can find out. I would think if you're planning on conducting business this year, for those protections and legal considerations, I probably would do it, but I would talk to my tax professional to understand what that grace period is and what those requirements are. If I was talking to a startup, I would tell them to wait. Like an early stage startup, I would say just wait. I want proof of market. I want evidence and traction. But it's different depending on the business type. So yeah, because I have a lot of budding entrepreneurs that will form an LLC and they're not quite ready. And then they're held to that tax liability or that renewal fee with the state. Yeah, great point, Jesse. Thank you. Many business attorneys include EIN services as part of their flat fee. Yeah, so they'll get you. They actually have really good intake forms, like clean, because they've done this a lot and they want to speed up the process. And they have good intake forms that you fill out, give them the information you need, and they'll guide you through all of the right steps and help you with the EIN. They'll file it for you. They'll do a lot of that for you. So find a good GC. Yeah. Find a good lawyer, like a good legal and that understands formation. Yeah. Thank you, Jesse. All right, one of my favorite topics is financing your startup. What are the financing options? ¿Cómo puede levantar capital y financiar su nueva empresa. So there's some key things to think about when it comes to fundraising. And there are, initially, when it comes to financing options, timing is everything. Evidence, some proof of readiness. And these are some key considerations here that I'll go through one by one. And I promise in my next presentation, we'll have bilingual slides, like everything bilingual through and through. So English and Spanish. So the first thing is, are you generating revenue? Like, are you generating is there evidence of traction? So we're looking at not only how to fund your new idea, your business, funding options, but also the timing around that, because it's important to be ready. And there's a ton of financing program options, funding options, and we'll go through a few of those. But one of my favorite funding options is what they call the 3 Fs. I don't know if you've heard of the 3 Fs, but the first round, when you look at seed funding, the people you should go to for capital are friends, family, and what they call fools. Friends, family, and fools are people that are willing to take a risk, right? Willing to take a risk. So the first option is friends, family, and fools. And so there's a few things to think about. So the first one is, are you operating with revenue and generating that cash flow? And the next thing is, can you demonstrate a need for the capital? If you're going to go through the route of a loan, if you're going through the route of a loan, you're going to have certain requirements depending on which bank you're working with, right? Some are going to have a deeper due diligence process. And of course, you have to demonstrate that you need the loan. So growing traction, growth is a great reason to ask for capital, right? Initial evidence and traction. And another key question is, what are you going to use the funds for? That's the third question. So what are you going to use the funds for? Another key question, another key criteria is what is your experience and history in business? So what is the experience of the firm? What is your experience and your history? What is your another reason for bookkeeping is, what does your bookkeeping look like? You can generate reports through things like QuickBooks, where you can bring that data and have it clean and ready to just simplify and accelerate the process for securing a loan. So of course, your credit score, your FICO credit score. The next thing is your personal assets. What are your personal assets? And in some cases, you may have to guarantee, you may have to have some collateral. You may want to have a collateral to match the loan. Some folks do that. Some folks have come in with capital already, some cash already that helps secure the loan. So those are different options there. So these are questions to ask: is what are your current assets? What is the need? What are you going to use the funds for? Is there readiness for the funds? And what is the current state of cash flow? Questions on things to think about before you speak to a lender. So the first one is friends, family, and fools. Of course, good capital, free capital. The best capital is free capital. The best form of revenue is customer funding, right? If you're generating sales, you don't need, just keep it going, right? Use those funds. You got good profit margin. You're able to scale. That's the best form of funding, is customer funding. And if you can be debt-free and don't dilute your cap table if you're starting to raise capital or things like that, the longer you can operate on that type of revenue, that's the best form of revenue. You know, and it's amazing what can be done through even start, growth, and scale through customer funding. But if you do need to borrow and work with a lender, these are the key considerations. So are there any questions around the first steps for financing your venture? Okay, so I'm paying for most. Some of the guys are helping lightly with some costs. I'm working part-time. Okay. Yeah, so when we talked about the having the systems in place, process and system is going to be everything. Yes, please drop an agreement. If you want to talk offline and reach out to me after the workshop, I'm happy to help you explore how to put that structure in place. So you have structure with the people you're working with, and you're funding your venture to keep it alive. Revenue is going to be your best friend, right? Revenue is going to be your best friend in demonstrating and having that structure in place to raise additional capital. What I see with a lot of small business owners is they and I'll use a few examples that I'm personally connected to. Is like, I have in my family folks who've been in business for like 40 years, small business, and they're growing and offering their products and services, and they've been at a certain level. But what you have to recognize is that awesome level of consistency and stability, if you're able to provide value and deliver on your products and services, and you can scale that. Like, don't be afraid to scale and to raise capital, because the capital will help you achieve the help with personnel, get the right staff to bring structure and organization and processes in place, helping you become not just a one-stop coffee shop, but maybe the coffee shop with 10 locations. So if you want to grow and scale, don't be afraid to raise capital, because capital can be a strategic boost, right? So raise the right capital. Loans and debt, of course, are important considerations. There are also different types of options available. Y hay diferentes opciones disponibles. Hay fondos federales, capital de riesgo, más conocido como venture capital, VC. There are different types of capital available. There's federal grants, federal opportunities, federal monies out there. There are organizations that the SBDC can help you be aware of with regard, depending on the type of business you're in and the industry. There's a lot of money and a lot of funds coming down from the federal government for business catalyzation. Y más si son un emprendedor, un empresario. There's a ton of money. I don't want to say ton to over exaggerate it, but there's pathways to secure good money, free money, without having to be weighed down by debt and those obligations. So there's a lot of good grants and funds out there. There's what we call angel investors. Hay inversionistas de capital semilla, conocido como angel investors. Hay grupos de angel investors, conocido como ángeles investors, Vamos Ventures. Hay otro grupo que se llamado Latitude Ventures, que acaban de levantar $100 millones para invertir en emprendedores. So there's a lot of different funds out there, a lot of different investors who are looking to fund early stage startups and small business, depending on the type and the venture, and especially depending on the demographic of the business. Yeah.
Women in business, names you can help provide where we can navigate.
Women, yeah, absolutely. I can quickly find some stuff for you offhand. Offhand is not coming to me, but there's a few. Are you aware of any funds for women small business owners? I know they're out there, and I know where to find them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. If you on the SBA's website, they have specifically areas where you can go and look at grant options, specifically by categories such as women-owned businesses. So I'll be sure to include a link to that.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, SBA.gov, great resource. And there's a bunch of nonprofits. There's what they call, there's not only VC, venture capital funds and angel investors, but there's impact funds, depending on the business, the demographic makeup. There's some resources and funds available, for sure. So another option is what they call crowdfunding. Otra opción es la recaudación de fondos, crowdfunding. viene de plataformas como Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and so there's another option is crowdfunding outside of venture capital, angel investors. There's crowdfunding. There's platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Republic. These are great, and this is near and dear to my heart because one of my first startups was a crowdfunding platform, and I launched a crowdfunding platform, and so it's a great way to fund projects in their early stages, crowdfunding. And so if you want more resources, a lot of people now there are things to be careful with crowdfunding. Crowdfunding are great. There's a ton of grants for Latinos. That's what I was trying to say. There's a ton of options for grants specifically, and there's people who are raising funds to invest in Latina-led ventures. So I'm happy to share that information and give you more of those resources after connecting after the workshop. So great question. Yes, there's quite a few. There's the Latino Community Foundation. There's things like the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, Camino Financial. There's quite a few options and opportunities out there. Most companies like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Xfinity are going to have programs for Latina-led small business. So I'm happy to talk about that. But crowdfunding, there are some things to keep in mind with crowdfunding. Now, here locally in the San Luis Obispo County, there's been quite a few success stories that folks have raised a good amount of money in capital on crowdfunding. And there's different types of crowdfunding. There's what they call rewards-based, and then there's equity-based, where you have to give a piece of your business venture. And then, but it is a great mechanism for determining pre-sale, level of pre-sales. It's a way to test viability, is to put a campaign together. But there are some considerations with crowdfunding. We could do a whole workshop on crowdfunding, any of these topics. With crowdfunding is you don't just want to jump on Kickstarter and launch a campaign. You want to put a strategy, because the last thing I'm going to say about crowdfunding is 90% of the funds raised, 90% of the traction building with a crowdfunding campaign occurs before you press go live on the campaign. You have to generate a lot of pre-momentum. And when we were working with crowdfunding projects, the projects that didn't do well were those that didn't put the work, but those that did do well were those that primed the pump before going live with their campaign. So they had a marketing plan. They had contacts of people who were going to fund and join their funding project. So crowdfunding is a great option, but just be prepared to put some work into it, like any campaign. There are local grants and grant options. There are, of course, credit lines. There are, you could get a line of credit. There are different things and different options when it comes to funding. So these are just a few of the more popular options. Any questions? Now, really scope out local grants, local states, local communities, counties, because a lot of the time, if you pay attention to the economic development groups, a lot of these groups who are under the umbrella of economic development are constantly raising funds and putting together grant opportunities for small businesses. And so there may be some local rotating funds that you can tap into. And we have consultants within the SBDC who have a lot of expertise in these areas with these grants and local funds, and many of them have funding options as well. So one thing I was going to say, with grant opportunities, funding options, local options. Questions? Is there questions on funding your business venture? Initially, or even through growth and scale?
So you don't get a loan,
Yes.
which I'd like to avoid, and you need to get your business account. When does that start? When do you do that? Is this now, before the LLC, after? When do you
Open a bank account?
Yeah.
Great question. So when do you open a bank account? I would say once you have, I would say first do that legal, because the last thing you want is to mix your personal assets with your business expenses and assets and have all that convolution between, your personal bank account and spending money and expenses that's not tied to a specific business or entity. So I would say do the formation, get your EIN, and then go to the bank, and they're going to be willing to open a business account and have that as a place to centralize all your income and transaction. Yeah.
And any banks that you recommend as far as working for small business?
Yes, I have a list of some that I know of that have been given to me. Do you have recommendations offhand, Madison, on banks that we typically recommend? I can tell you that are usually really business start friendly. I have a few. Let me see here. I have a few. There's a few. Ceslock. Yeah, and let them know Judy Mahan referred you, or the SBDC.
Okay.
Liz Summer with Ceslock. Ryan Maxwell with Pacific Western Bank. Another one has been American Riviera Bank with Jay Beck. Mike Brenneman with Bridge Bank. These are referrals that Judy Mahan with SBDC has shared.
Also Kelly Caviglia with Bridge Bank.
Kelly Caviglia.
One of our contacts there.
Will
Okay.
you be including all that you said? I don't know. I was able to show all that
We
stuff.
can.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be
We
great.
can for sure. So those are a few starting places. There are a few banks that have some perks. So I would really ask them, like you're there to like build that lasting partnership with them, of course, but like you want to take advantage of all the perks. Like there's some banks that have resources for small business, and so I would be scoping that out. And especially if you're like a startup, there are banks that have, I can think of Silicon Valley Bank, another one. If you're planning to be a scale up and scale, there's a whole line of resources they have. So I would say open a bank account when you have your entity formation in place, your EIN, and open it up, and then have that established. And then later on, if you're ready and the timing is right, then go for that loan.
Okay.
And if you can't raise funding, then there's other options for sure. There's a ton of options. And it's debt may not always be the best form of funding.
Right.
Debt may not be the best form of funding, but it's a growth catalyst. It's a tremendous resource. Are there any other questions? These are good questions. Funding. How do you fund your venture? Access to capital. Is this helpful? Any thumbs up in the chat, my virtual audience? Oh, okay, thank you. Russ, thank you. I miss you, man. Russ is an amazing entrepreneur and leader. So we got to catch up sometime. Yes, we do. He was in the accelerator 2 years ago, and we worked with him for 13 weeks, him and his team, and super awesome. We got to catch up. So good to see you on the call. All right, we shall continue. All right, this breakdown here is this is the cycle of financing a startup. And I bring this up because it's something to think about with regards to raising capital. Este es el ciclo de financiamiento de una startup. Hay diferentes niveles, diferentes etapas y programas y opciones de financiamiento. Y esto se trata del levantamiento de capital. And so this is showing that over time, on the left, you have your revenue and your cash flow, your ingresos, and then over time to the right. And so the first stage, this is just an outlook of like, there's different funding levels. There's different levels of funding for your startup or for your business idea. There's what they call the pre-seed stage, the seed stage, and then there's Series A, and they have different terminologies, but it's Series A, Series B, into growth, into what they call venture capital. So the first step for launching your business and raising capital is in that acceleration stage, that launch stage. And usually you're going to be dealing with angel investors, taking on debt, doing things like maybe taking advantage of grants. And over time, as you generate revenue, there's going to be greater options available. Now, you can raise capital and angel investment with the back of the napkin idea. You don't have to have a product or service developed. You just have to have a vision. If you have a vision with the right plan and the right outlook, you've done your homework, you can raise capital. There's a lot of good funds out there from good angel investors where you can raise seed capital, what they call capital de semilla, seed capital. And then as you're growing, raise things like Series A, Series B, and greater amounts of money. So there are angels. So you can see there's the F and Fs. There's the friends and family rounds. These are typically known as friends and family rounds. The first level, you have pre-seed, then you have seed, then you have Series A, and then into things like venture capital or even private equity and things like mergers and acquisitions or strategic, they call strategic funding. So the reason I brought this graphic up and I really wanted to showcase this is because it's the life cycle of funding over time for a business venture. And there's different options, different types of investors. Questions on angel investment, when to talk to an angel, or these types of capital opportunities? I think traditionally small business is going to be looking at grants, loans, credit lines, those types of things. It's not hitting me, Madison. What are the names of funds online that fund businesses, the websites? Like there's a few online lenders. There's a few online lenders that are vetted and validated, that are another option and usually have really good friendly terms. And you just got to be careful with the ability to repay, not your ability to repay, but just make sure, do some checks and balances on the site. But there are some peer-to-peer lending sites where people are donating to small business entrepreneurs, small business owners, and because they get a return. So it's a great way if you have capital to actually raise additional capital and get some returns on an investment over time. And they're peer-to-peer lending. Do we have contacts in Kern County for banking options? Tony, are we talking banking options?
The center in our network that is responsible for Kern County is CSU Bakersfield.
Okay.
So I'll be sure to include their information. So he can reach out to their center directly to get some more information on relevant local opportunities.
Awesome. Yeah, Tony, I have some contacts in Bakersfield as well, some boots on the ground, some really good people if you want to connect with that can help you through that process. So really the grant timing, the timing it takes for a grant will depend. I mean, it really depends on who's issuing the grant. There's usually a good time frame. There's an application period. There's an initial period where they're putting out an initial call and they're starting to build awareness and secure interest from those potential grantees. So it really depends. It really depends.
Can you give a range of minimum max?
Well, the California Dream Fund, for instance, for our startups, that process is taken. We started preparing for that because the window to apply wasn't quite open yet, and we did it in August, I believe. And they had to go through, it was a fresh start for these businesses. They had to get their licenses, establish their bank accounts, get their EIN, get all of those paperwork in order, and then apply it and submit. And so I would say it's been about a couple of months. It's been a couple of months. So it's not, the grants usually they do take time. It'll be like over a couple of months. There's that window of time for them to select, award, and execute on the funds. Now, the thing to keep in mind again is create some alerts to these funding sources. For instance, Lendistry and programs that use Lendistry, these grant options, you can subscribe for alerts for when they're going to put out a call for grantees, and you can be prepared for the requirements. You can understand what those requirements are and have that in line and ready and be ready to apply and subscribe to those alerts. You can take advantage because one of them, of course, the SBDC during the pandemic did a fantastic job of getting a lot of grant money through all the PPL loans and all of that. And for instance, there was some growth capital that I helped somebody in my network get some boost funds through the grant for their auto body business. And it was over a couple of months. It took a couple of months. It wasn't like 2 weeks and let's go. It's usually a pretty lengthy process, but it's well worth it because it's extra capital that you can take advantage of. Other questions? Anybody online? All right, so another key resource, and I have a list that I can share with all the attendees is startup resources, but one of the biggest resources, and there's a lot of different organizations that are putting together these programs that are commonly known as accelerators. And so we run through Top College Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, we run an accelerator 13 weeks for our student startups, our student-led startups, very early stage. But one option to really look into accelerator is usually over a 10-12 week time period, usually 13 weeks. They're usually vertical focused, maybe restaurants. They're looking at restaurants. There's quite a few accelerators and programs available for entrepreneurs and even small businesses. So I really, for the folks on the call, I really want to put out this opportunity to examine what that interest would look like for a more lengthy program. You know, one of the programs that the SBDC offers is the incubator program. It's a 2-year program. It's a great resource and a launch pad for startups, support for businesses. And you access mentorship, resources, and accountability, and a network of consultants. So before you move into something like an incubator, there's what they call a pre-accelerator or an accelerator. And it's usually, again, 10 to 12 weeks, 13 weeks. And so what is an accelerator? So an accelerator is what do they offer? So the perks of joining an accelerator is they offer mentorship, oftentimes capital for those folks admitted into an accelerator, connections to investors. I know through the SBDC and the SCIE, it's one of the tremendous resources we offer is connection to investors, access to community. You get access to community, best practices. There's resources, activities, workshops, and partnerships that you can establish with other people in the accelerator or in your cohort. And there's quite a bit of resource out there in this category of accelerators. So if this is something you're interested in, of like a more, like a 10 to 12 to 13 week accelerator and that dedicated time and that dedicated runway, please let me know. So I can circle back with the team and talk about this interest. So for instance, there's a tremendous opportunity out there, something that me and Judy have talked about in the past, which was there's grant opportunities that open up, and there's opportunities for us to provide content and programming and curriculum for a set number of small businesses, but we have to have the demand. And usually the demand is there and the opportunity is available for depending on demographics. So especially women-led ventures, Latino-led, Black-led, there's a ton of opportunities there. So if we have the demand, I'm putting this out there to offer and work with the team to put together a program, an official program of 10 to 12 weeks. So we just need to know where the demand is at. So we're planting the seed. We're planting the seed for what that may look like if the interest and the demand is there. For folks on the call, you have an idea, a business, a venture, if you're launching and scaling and ready to tap into some resources, definitely consider the incubator, that 2-year program. If you're very early stage and you have more of a hunger for content and programming that you can tap into, this may be an option we can explore.
And how do you get into an accelerator program?
So an accelerator program, there's many different types and there's many available. So usually you apply online, you apply with your pitch deck, your vision, and depending on the criteria, others are going to be more based on small business. Some will be based on small business. Some will be based on like true startups. And there's quite a few that have been established that are doing a lot of work on the startup space, startup and scale up space. But you would apply. You would be a part of a cohort of applicants. There would probably be some interviewing. And then there'd be a selection process, and then there'd be an orientation, and then a culmination of a 10 to 12 week, usually a 3-month, 10 to 12 week outlook.
Is this, sorry, this is just, this is a stupid question, but, is this in lieu of maybe hiring your tax person or hiring your lawyer or hiring, it's a program that you can get into, which basically provides you all of these resources?
Yeah.
So that you're just like basically being out there.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the perks of being an accelerator.
And it's
So the-
offered to one group, you're not sort of a cohort, it's a bunch of people applying and then one is
And then
selected.
that cohort is selected and they're part of that cohort. So we have the 13-week accelerator we run for Cal Poly student-led startups.
Okay.
So that's a big proof point. And one of the perks and values that they get away is they get all of that coaching and mentorship through these areas of like licensing, entity formation, intellectual property, which we haven't talked about, it's a whole nother topic, protecting trademark patents, those types of things, copyrights, those types of
And
things.
what's the time frame? Are we looking at January? When is this?
I'm just putting this out there to collect some interest so we can be prepared. And I can circle back with Judy and the team to really discuss this opportunity.
Okay.
But it's been brought up before, and to really gauge interest around that type of a structure.
Yeah.
Is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, who are the people that are on your team? So if you're a small business and you have this team of people through this 10 to 12 weeks, who are they? Are they licensed professionals? Or are we talking about students who are getting internship type of, experience or?
Who's providing the resource and mentorship? They're usually consultants and professionals in the field. The same network of consultants from like the SCDC, a lot of them, people that want to contribute. So
essentially you could do this in a kind of, gift wrapped purchase, or you can just be doing it on your own. But
Exactly.
the gift wrap purchase, obviously,
right.
because it's a boost and it's
Right.
structure and it's accountability
right?
and it's that timeline and that focus and that runway.
Yeah, you've been given a basically little corporation for yourself.
It's the community, the peer collaboration, because once you're in the cohort, there's dedicated times of programming and topic workshops that you can take advantage of. So, and yeah, so absolutely.
Okay.
So if there's interest, let me know.
Okay. I think we're saying yes.
I think we're interested.
Yeah.
I think we're just trying to understand, what's the benefit of doing that versus, kind of going out on doing it by ourselves.
Are you SBDC clients officially?
I'm not.
Okay,
Not yet.
not yet. Okay, that would be the first step. Would be to sign up as an SBDC client.
Okay.
So you can tap into all of the programming and content, and this is an example of that, like these workshops. And access our network of consultants
Okay.
and establish and get the support you need there. That's step one.
Okay.
First, great research.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, so questions as we wrap up these final minutes, any Q&A. So here's how you can contact us confidentially without cost, obligation to access our network of consultants. You could register on the site. There's the link, californiasbdc.biz/CP signup. If you're not already a client of the SBDC, you can sign up there for all of the alerts and register as a client and start to plug into these resources. So questions? I'll stick around for Q&A. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully this was helpful. This is I think phase one, part one of some very important topics. So